welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton. And today's guest is Deb Flashenberg, speaking on a topic near and dear to my heart, finding autonomy in pregnancy and birth. Deb is the founder and director of the Prenatal Yoga Center in New York City. Along with being a prenatal yoga teacher, she's also a labor support doula, Lamaze childbirth educator, mother of two, and self-proclaimed birth and anatomy geek. Deb received her first vinyasa yoga certification with Shiva Rea and then added to her education by completing the Yoga Advanced Yoga Teacher Training with Cyndi Lee. After the challenging birth of her first child, Deb became incredibly interested in pelvic health and has since earned her Pelvic Floor Yoga Certification with Leslie Howard. For the past 4 years, Deb has also greatly enjoyed being the host of the podcast, Yoga, Birth, Babies, where she speaks with some of the world's leading experts in pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding, and parenthood. For more information, check out her website at prenatalyogacenter.com. Hi, Deb. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have you on today.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to speak with you.
So let's just start off with talking a little bit about who you are and what your story is and how you're so passionate about pregnancy and birth.
It was a very roundabout way. I was not one of those kids growing up. Like my daughter right now, she's 7. She loves to play with dolls. She plays family with our neighbor. I was not that kid at all. I had like 1 or 2 dolls. And I remember like one of them named Amy. I cut all her hair and like painted her and like left her outside. Like it was just I was never that maternal person. But I came into prenatal yoga from the background of being a musical theater performer. And I was getting more into the yoga than performing. And then as I got more into the yoga, I ended up doing, it's kind of my dirty yoga secret. I did Bikram yoga, and it's like I don't love it now. But
I didn't know that was a dirty secret.
Well, I just feel like I don't know if you know Bikram yoga, but the man himself, I have little respect for him. And I believe he was charged with like sexual harassment. Like, and the series itself is, we're talking about autonomy. Like there was no autonomy in that. Like it was a monologue of what to do. It wasn't what is right for your body. Let's look at who you are as an individual. So the fact that now I do prenatal and it's so about empowering choices, I came from the opposite. So as I was doing the Bikram, I was just not happy with it. And someone mentioned prenatal yoga. And I mentioned that to my mom who does marketing. And she's like, that is the place to go because people are always going to be pregnant and they're going to take care of themselves when they're pregnant. So I went into it, again, not super passionate about pregnancy until I had a student. She was doing her fellowship at one of the New York City hospitals. And I was 28 at the time, and maybe 29. And she said, do you want to come see some births? And I hadn't seen any in person. You know, being a performer, it wasn't in my 20s. My group of friends, they weren't having babies at that time. That just wasn't our focus. So when I went to see some live births and I saw, I scrubbed in for cesarean. I didn't last the whole thing. I actually saw a twin vaginal breach, which when learning now, I'm like, wow, that's kind of unusual. And then I saw another just very kind of ordinary birth. And then there was one that was kind of like its turning point in my life, that the couple didn't speak English. They were having a bit of drama around it that when you do a vacuum extraction, if the vacuum pops off the baby's head a third time, they can no longer use that intervention. It often goes to a cesarean. So everyone was in the room, including me, and the head doctor there was using the vacuum extraction, and the baby came out. Everyone's like, yay. And then everyone left, leaving the baby in the warmer and leaving the parents a little bit shell-shocked. Like no one was really caring for them. And the nurse was doing her notes, and I, for whatever reason, was left there just kind of standing with the baby. And it shocked me that, yes, the baby was healthy, but there was such it seemed to be little consideration about the family building and the person that just had the baby and the baby getting connected with the parents. And it just seemed very procedural. Baby's out, parents are there, baby's there, get the notes done. And so when I left that day, I just knew that there had to be more to supporting parents than just modifying yoga asana. So I signed up to become a doula. And then after doing that, I then became a Lamaze teacher. And the more I got into supporting pregnant people, the more I saw that there was a lot of routine interventions that didn't always get supported by science, by data, and that people didn't know to ask questions. They weren't really given the option, even though ACOG says like the care provider is supposed to give the pros and cons and lay it out. From a practical standpoint, I wasn't seeing that happening when I was there as a doula. I was seeing things skewed a little towards this is what we're going to do, as opposed to this is what we're suggesting we do. Here are the pros and cons, here are the risks and the benefits. What would you like to do? And so I just got very passionate about, again, I'm never the one making the decisions, but just that people should know they have decisions to make and that they have a choice in what happens with their body. And it doesn't always feel presented in that way. So
yeah, I mean, this is basic informed consent.
Yeah. So that's kind of like, that's a long-winded answer to what I do and who I am.
And so what I love, though, is this predates you becoming a mom yourself.
Oh, by a lot. Yes.
Yeah. So, wow, what an amazing introduction to see births, which so many women don't see until they're actually giving birth for the first time themselves, and recognizing that there can be some improvements in the way it's currently being handled.
Yeah. And it was interesting. So by the time I was having my own kids, which was about 10 years already in the birth world, and I'd already witnessed over 100 births as a doula, I had pretty clear ideas of what I felt comfortable with. And really comes down to like, where did I feel safest? And I chose, and it's not right for everyone, but I chose a home birth with a midwife. And when my mom asked me why, because she couldn't wrap her head around that, it came to, from what I saw, and you can have a beautiful supportive birth in a hospital, but from what I saw, there was definitely some hoops to jump through. It wasn't a clear option of, oh yes, you absolutely, especially in New York, it's gone. We had a birth center, but it was kind of like a unicorn to get in there. There were so many options where I saw people, they signed up for it. And then when they were in labor, it was like threading a fine needle. Like they didn't always get there. So I actually felt safest at home with an amazing team.
Yeah. As did I as well. So I can really relate to that. And it's funny, home birth is still like 1% in the US or even less. And I think generally a lot of American women think it's actually not safe, right? So I think it is important for those of us who've had this amazing birth experience at home to share our stories. And just to let know women that once again, it's an option. It's not an option for everyone. Certainly medically, you have to be healthy and clear to be able to do that. But I think it's good for women to know that that's the midwife's job, to know if there's a red flag where you don't qualify to be a home birth candidate, and therefore you are safest in a hospital. But if you're healthy, low risk, then this could really be a great option.
Yeah. And I remember in our teacher training, we have them write an essay about home birth. And I had a teacher training student say, what do you want from this? Why am I writing this? And I said, I just want you to educate yourself on what it is. So if a student asks, what are your options? What are my options? That can be included, because I would say it to students, and some of them had never even heard of it or didn't understand it, just assumed that meant that my husband and I were just at home being like, okay, here we go. Good luck.
Accident or whatever.
Yeah. And it can be an option if someone, again, like you said, qualifies for it.
Yeah. And that's the midwife's responsibility to make that medical judgment. So I think it's important to know that midwives are properly trained and qualified to know about that. My son was actually born in our apartment in Weehawken, and the claim to fame there is the only other, when I went to get the birth certificate, there's no hospitals in Weehawken, New Jersey. And the last baby that had a Weehawken birth certificate was born outside the Lincoln Tunnel. The parents did not make it into New York for the birth. So yeah, that baby was born, in a car. like literally outside of Lincoln Tunnel. Very different experience than what I had.
How did your family take it, if you don't mind me asking, when you were?
Well, my sister had a home birth,
Okay.
2 home births previously. So I think that helped from that perspective. And, yeah, my sister and I were raised with a chiropractic lifestyle. So I think in general, like it was, maybe our cousins don't fully get it, but they kind of know to just leave us alone.
Yeah, that is not like I was raised near very, in fact, put quotes like typical that, a doctor knows best and medicine. Again, I think doctors have, and Western medicine has a place, but I also think there can be other options. And that was not what I was brought up with. So when we went in that route, it was very much kind of myth busting about, and that's again, come back to that autonomy of like not caving and feeling the pressure of my family being like, what craziness is this? And then explaining to them that this is where I felt most seen and heard and respected. And I mean, they eventually came around to it that, it's what I did.
Yeah.
They didn't love it.
Well, it is interesting too, because I see that some of the women in my office choose to not really share too much with family or friends because they're really not wanting to have to defend their position. They don't want to have to feel like they have to educate, especially while you're pregnant. You don't need to be on the defense. You don't need to have to like be fighting for your choices, right? And that whether it's with family, well-meaning family or friends, or even a practitioner, right? If you're, let's say OBGYN is kind of not, in alignment with what you want and you're having to defend why you're making these choices, that's a red flag that this birth provider may not be the right fit for you. And you need to possibly interview others that are going to be respectful of those choices.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you said that, it made me think that I had a very unique experience with my OB. So I had been with him since I was like 23. So it was a long time. I had my first child at 37. So I had a great relationship with him as, he was my doctor, but also I would see him in the hospitals, like when I was a doula. So we had a professional relationship. And so when I got pregnant and told him these are my choices, it was wonderful because he in no way ever gave me like crazy person talk, like, oh, are you sure you want to do that? You're in hospitals. Like he's like, of course you want to make that choice. And he actually was our backup that if something happened and we had to transfer to a hospital, he was going to come in. And I didn't know until after that, because my first birth was very long, that he and the midwife were actually having conversations if I was going to have to transfer. So it was a very unique setup that I felt really supported. But on the other side, I've had students and doula clients that haven't felt supported and felt like they were a bit on the defense. And that's not great. We know that hormonally during labor, if you're on that defense and you're in that fight or flight, your body's not going to relax into this. So trying to really find the best support team, I think it's so important for someone to have a functional, powerful birth.
It really is. And it goes back to, once again, really, I think when you're pregnant, you have to have even stronger boundaries around who you spend time with, what kind of information's coming into your sphere, whether it's the news, media, whatever. And if it's not supporting your energy positively, then you need to kind of shut it out, whether it is like kind of turning off the news channel, or if it's, a mother-in-law who is not supportive, whatever it is, whoever this person is, you can put up those walls and not feel guilty about that, because you're doing, once again, what's best for you and your child. And you have every right to create these boundaries.
I think though, unfortunately, people don't know if they're getting great information. I mean, this can be a bigger topic about misinformation, but they're hearing from their aunt or their friend about, oh, my birth went this way, this is what you should do, and not necessarily knowing all the facts. And then unfortunately, birth education class attendance is really dropping. I don't remember the statistics, but I did a research blog on this about how much childbirth education attendance has dropped. And so then where are people getting their information?
Is that related to COVID?
No, this was happening well before. This is like a last 10, 15 year situation. People are getting more information just from family and friends. I can try to find the article and send it to you. People are getting information from family and friends. People are just looking up stuff online. They're just not interested in taking classes. And so they're walking into their birth situation, not necessarily with fantastic evidence-based information, maybe again, hearsay or anecdotes, or their care provider saying, I'll just tell you everything you need. And then again, they might, and then another research moment I did was, and again, I'll try to find the article to send you the link. It was people that had inductions and their satisfaction of their birth was greatly influenced by, did they have education about it? And those that had education felt more satisfied, even if it didn't go exactly as planned, to people that didn't. I think it has a lot to do with kind of the trauma of it. If you're not helping to make choices about what's happening in your own body, it can be traumatizing.
There's no doubt. And I do see in my practice, I take care of a lot of postpartum women, and they will have PTSD from these traumatic birth experiences. And, I have to refer them for therapy or hypnotherapy, some sort of support to help their nervous system process what happened. And some of this could have been preventable, right? If they had been educated, empowered, they had known how to speak up for themselves, when to speak up, who was, deserving of their trust to be at the birth, for example, whether it's a birth provider or so on, where they gave birth, all of these decisions that you don't make these when you're in labor. These are all planned months in advance. And, but if you don't recognize the importance of these decisions, until you're in it, then it's sometimes a little bit too late.
So then that kind of leads me to thinking of, how are people supposed to know? It's like one of my friends always said, like, you don't know what you don't know. So then how are we as birth advocates, how can we help people that may not necessarily be in our circle know to ask these questions and know that these are important topics to look into prior to actually being in labor? Like if you're maybe the care provider or the nurse or someone says, okay, we would like to start talking about Pitocin. And they might explain it there and then, but if you're just hearing it for the first time while in labor, you're not in the best decision-making place. So how can we help people? How can the message get out about the education needs to happen ahead of time? I don't know. I'm baffled by that.
I mean, I think one way is through podcasts. You and I both have podcasts that speak on these topics. Yeah. They are free. You can listen to them living anywhere in the world, and as long as you speak English. And I know that's a big reason why I created a podcast. I'm assuming the same for you. And then there's so much great information out there, that there's so many great resources that can talk to what we're speaking on right now. Books like Ina May Gaskin has some amazing books about this type of topic of autonomy and pregnancy and birth, and other birth advocates as well. And I think it's up to women to really do the work, right? There's a lot of opportunity here to grow yourself before you get pregnant, while you're pregnant, and really preparing yourself to become an empowered mother. And it does require education. I mean, it's just not it doesn't just happen. You know what I mean? You really have to prepare.
Yeah, but I feel like some people don't know to do that, or they don't get information. Again, they get it from their aunt, their sister-in-law, or whoever that will say, oh, I didn't have to do any of that. And I'm not trying to be challenging. I'm really grappling with it.
Yeah, that is out there. I mean, for example, when a woman will say that to me in my office, it will be like, oh, I've been hearing all these horrible birth stories, and she's currently pregnant, right? And it's creating fear within her nervous system. And I feel like that becomes part of the subconscious programming. It can literally have her create a traumatic birth experience based off that fear, right? So my advice to her when we're having that conversation is, once again, you have to politely block those people out. They have no right to they have no right to make you their therapist about their birth trauma. They can go to a professional for that service. And you need to surround yourself with positive birth stories. And sometimes, if it's appropriate, I share my birth story and they'll be like, wow, I've never heard a positive birth story. But there are lots of them out there. And women that are pregnant need to fill their heads with positive birth stories and know that it's possible that they can also have a positive birth story.
Yeah, and I do think you're right. I think sometimes, and I see this, and sometimes we have new mom support groups. And when they were in the studio and I would sometimes be around them, I think sometimes the parents and new parents can kind of feed into each other about their negative birth stories, if they had one. And as they wanted almost healing, like they were telling it to heal,
to vent and share and connect.
Yeah. But I could see it also being their call for support and therapy, but also still processing it, and then them all kind of coming in it together. And sometimes it came to a resolution where everyone felt better, but sometimes it just kind of went deeper into the quagmire, or I think they felt even worse coming out.
Yeah. And that example is women that have already given birth, as opposed to sharing that with a current pregnant woman, who hasn't given birth yet. But I think the other thing that comes up, and I don't know if you've experienced this, when you have a lot of new moms sharing their traumatic birth stories, it's also hard to be the mom in the group to say, hey, I had a great birth. It was amazing. My baby was born in the water. It was short. And it's like, nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah. But it's good to at least put it out there. I had 2 very different births. My first one was very long and I wouldn't say it was it was traumatic in the fact that my body afterwards just was a hot mess. And mentally, I'm like, oh my God, what was that? But it helped inspire me to look at things differently for my second, which was a fraction of the time. And, I look at that a little more positively. But you can have challenging births, I think, wherever. But again, I think the reason I didn't come out of my first one as emotionally traumatized as I know some people do, was because never during that time did I feel disrespected. I felt like my team was there holding the space. I never felt pushed or rushed. I mean, it was long. It was like 42 hours. And I knew that. But it wasn't like I had someone coming in being like, if you don't get things going, we're going to have to start talking cesarean. Again, I think maybe my midwife and doctor were doing that on their own without me knowing, but it wasn't in my face where when I had, and this isn't every time, but there had been times when I was a doula that I knew the time clock was ticking. Like I remember with one client, she pushed for 3 hours, and I knew that a lot of hospitals have kind of this 3-hour limit. But she had a situation where her contractions really spaced out. So in that second stage where they're typically 5-6 minutes apart, she was like 8 minutes apart. And so I brought up to the doctor, I'm like, she hasn't had quite the same amount of pushing time because her contractions spread out so much. I'm like, can we push the clock a little and have a little more time? And I used my 3 questions. Is the birthing person okay? Is the baby okay? Can we have more time? And the doctor kind of reluctantly said yes, which was great because then she had the vaginal birth she wanted. But there is often time constraints. And while my birth is crazy long, I never felt pressure of like, we're going to have to start the Pitocin, or you've been doing this long enough. It's time to take it, so, and I see that happening. And then I see people on the other side, like blaming themselves. What didn't I do?
They feel like failures.
Yeah. And that's hard.
And that's very disheartening. And that's really what I would consider a disempowered birth experience. And that really is not supportive of that woman as she's becoming a new mother and all of the choices and decisions that she's now making postpartum. As a mom of a toddler, I know how frustrating it can be when the sun is shining in my child's eyes. We're driving down the road and there's nothing I can do to protect him. I'm just praying that I'm going to be driving by some tree coverage so to help, shield that sun from his eyes. And that's why I was so excited to find this product from Baby Trend called Cover Me 4-in-1 Convertible Car Seat. This car seat is amazing. It comes with an innovative and patent pending integrative canopy that offers height adjustability flexibility, ratcheting coverage, and side sun protection to literally create an umbrella and shield that sun from my son's eyes, which is amazing. It's also so cool that this car seat can literally be used from newborn all the way through 100 pounds, which is phenomenal. It just makes the life easier for parents and child. To check it out, go to babytrend.com/OSSA, OSSA, and use the code COVERME20 for 20% off.
And then you think about if that person decides to have another child that's already living in their consciousness of, I failed the first time, or my body didn't do what it should have. I'm not right for this, or my body's not meant to have babies. Other people can, but my babies have to be born differently. And then whether maybe she gets herself or they get themselves a great team, it still might very much be in their subconscious.
Oh yeah. Those women, I refer to hypnotherapy because I do believe it is really like the tape that they're playing in their subconscious mind. And it's hard to consciously overcome that. So there are modalities that can support women in shifting that story.
Yeah. It's important to try to give them a fresh start so they can approach their next birth without carrying that weight.
Correct. And I would even say, this is going to be quite out there, but there's possibility that there could be past lives that had traumatic births that are coming in. So regardless if you're feeling this fear and you can't even quite like qualify of why you're feeling this way, it's an opportunity to kind of go deeper with different types of modalities that can, access the subconscious. Psych K is one of them, NLP, EFT. There's so many out there that women can try, and see what works for you. But just know that you don't have to just be like, well, I'm afraid and that's okay. Like there's your nervous system is telling you there's something up here. There's something juicy to discover.
Yeah, I really like that. I don't know a lot of the modalities that you were just mentioning. So.
Emotional freedom technique, like with the tapping. Psych K is something I do in my office. Hypnotherapy is powerful. And there's hypno babies out there and hypno birthing.
Yeah, I know about those. But I really enjoy those.
But hypnotherapy, you would work with a private hypnotherapist who would literally do a one-on-one session with you to help guide you on that specific life event and help clear the energy around it.
And I think that could be so helpful as someone heads in. Yeah, if they had that traumatic birth experience, they head in. Or what about even if they had just traumatic experiences through their lives and it's their first child? There can be, I worked with a client who, she had sexual assault. So when she was coming into her first birth, there was a lot about that. And what was amazing is she had a care provider that really respected that and held that space. And I think it should be, and I might get a little on my soapbox here, but I think that shouldn't have to be a conversation of this is a special case. I think that should be for everyone. When you're touching someone, when you're approaching their space. I did a spinning babies workshop back in May, and I was the only non-nurse there. I thought it was going to be a lot of yoga teachers and stuff, but in childbirth educators, everyone was an L&D nurse except me. And the teacher, the spinning babies facilitator, brought up informed consent and always asking permission before they touch someone. And one of the nurses, and I respect that she was so honest and brave, said, she sees so many patients a day that she'll introduce herself when she's there, like, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm going to be your nurse. But then she just touches them whenever she's in, just touches them. And she actually said, this is really making me step back and think that they're a person, not just a body that she's working on. And I could see how someone can get desensitized if you're used to over and over just going to see the body, that you don't always see them as the full person. So that was really remarkable to see. Maybe she's changed her approach. And then that can make someone feel so much more seen and heard and comfortable, because we don't know the trauma that people are walking in from when they're having their baby. So, again, it comes back to informed consent and autonomy, that we need to be respectful of their past, their body, their choices.
That's right. And, that also reminds me about like when you're interviewing for a birth provider, for example, ideally this is done first trimester, or the beginning of your second, like earlier in the pregnancy as opposed towards the end. And these are the type of questions you can ask. You have permission to ask this, and you can ask your provider, what is your C-section rate? Do you do episiotomies? Do you ask these types of questions? Maybe you have even some more that you can offer out in the interview process, because what you're looking for is these red flags. Does the doctor always do episiotomies? That's a red flag. Is they have a 50% C-section rate? That's a red flag. So, these are really important. So back to autonomy, I feel like interviewing your birth provider is a huge part of having autonomous pregnancy and birth.
Oh, I completely agree. I would even argue to try, if they can, to have these conversations before. We're talking about the preconception time.
Preconception.
Yeah. So getting a sense, thinking about not just conceiving, but what kind of pregnancy and birth is someone looking for? Again, where do they feel safest? Who is that person? What is that scenario? And then trying to interview, and it's not easy. I know a lot of care providers that will not see you until you're like 8 weeks. I know for when I was interviewing home birth midwives, it was a little bit easier to book appointments. And I went in with like a long list and making sure that you really do have that right person. And then thinking about, who do I want? Do I want more of a traditional obstetrician? Do I want more of the midwifery model? Do I want someone that is going to be there a lot, pretty hands-on? Do I want someone that's going to just kind of observe? So really thinking about, what is the unique care I need as a unique individual? I think that sets the stage for the whole entire pregnancy and birth, because who's showing up during the appointments is not going to change. And I've seen students think they're the exception, that, oh, I know my care provider says this, but I really think if I push hard enough, I can get this. And they're who they are. It's like marrying someone and assuming you're going to change them. Like
that's right. You're not changing them.
That's not going to happen. That's a sign of failure. It's not going to go so well. And it doesn't matter. And I've also seen as a doula, people would say, well, my care provider aren't seeing eye to eye, but I'm going to hire you. And then I'm thinking, oh, well, I don't have a magic wand or a cape. Like I can support you. I can encourage you. I can be there to explain the pros and cons. I'm not going to make your decisions. But if that's not how your care provider practices medicine, having a doula is not going to necessarily change. It might support and help you advocate for asking different questions, but it could still be problematic. And then that goes back to the hormones. If you're like banging heads, that's not conducive to having a baby.
Potential for lots of tears
from everyone.
From everyone. So I think that's important. And the one thing too I want to add in is, when you are interviewing, if you have a partner, your partner should be ideally involved as well, because if they're planning on being at the birth and, this is their baby and they're excited and have a lot of similar positive emotions, have them be part of the process.
I agree.
That's also very empowering.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I've seen partners that are right there, and I've seen partners that have discussed like not being as involved, for whatever various reasons. I think the whole team should be on the same page and with expectations.
Correct. And also, once again, like I can even speak for my husband's, like he was very clear, like, I don't want to catch the baby. I want, I'm here to like blow up the pool and provide refreshments, like a pool party. But like he had what was comfortable for him at the birth. But that was all communicated ahead of time so that, my expectations were, I could understand, where he was coming from.
I like that. And I think it really does come back to expectations, which helps with, the interviewing process. And, if your care provider is saying, I have a 40% induction or 50% induction rate, the expectations are set. Or I really am very firm on, you can start to push in any way you want, but I'm really firm on when it's time to catch the baby, you're on your back again, so that you're not arguing at the time, which I had seen. I've seen that arguing. So again, really setting those expectations, I think, is important. And then and this is hard, and I'm going to admit this is really hard, but knowing that, and this is not for everyone, stepping away from that care provider. I've had clients at 36, 37 weeks finding someone new, and it is not easy. Usually when they switch, it ends up being an out-of-pocket thing. So I know this is a privilege to be able to do that, and it's not an opportunity for everyone. And then really trying to stand up for, go get their records, go to someone else.
Right.
It's hard. It's doable, but it is really, really challenging.
Yeah. And there's some providers that are just like, no, I can't take somebody that late in the pregnancy, which is why we were discussing, this interviewing ideally is happening preconception or the very beginning of the pregnancy. And you feel really confident with the decision. It's a decision that you've made, like, this is my birth provider, as opposed to like, this has been my OB for the past 20 years and they did all my PAPs and now they're just going to deliver my baby. Because that's a different role.
Yeah.
Of being your GYN and now being a birth provider.
Yeah. And because I've had students say, oh, I have a great relationship. I'm like, you may, but if their birth philosophies greatly differ, it doesn't matter if you get along for your yearly checkups. Like, you deserve, I really think it comes back to the birthing person deserves to have a birth that they're really that reflects them. And it doesn't always turn out that way. I don't live in the fairy tale land, but are they with someone that is going to do as best as they can to support the vision of the birth? And if it doesn't come out as they envisioned, are they the right person to help with the negotiation, to kind of go with that flow, that things may not go that way, but the care providers offering these options and kindly explaining why things have to shift, as opposed to saying, well, we're doing this. I think that really impacts someone's perception.
It does. And I think it's important to mention, like you were saying, birth can go a lot of different ways. There could be a woman planning a home birth who ends up with an emergency C-section. This happens, but ideally it's still coming from an empowered place. So it's not that she failed or anything, or that she was disempowered. She's like, okay, this is what happened. And like, there's things out of our control. That's the bottom line when it comes to birth. But if you have the right team to support you, you can have an empowered C-section.
Yes, absolutely. I did an interview with Penny Simpkins, who I adore, and she talked a lot about the trauma of birth, and it's how the person is made to feel. So yes, the things may be completely different, but how were they made to feel? Were they supported? Were things explained? Was there space for them to grieve the birth maybe they didn't have, as opposed to, well, it's not about the birth, it's about this healthy baby. Of course we want the healthy baby, but are you given the space to process what's happened? Or are you shamed because, oh, it's not about you, it's about the baby. Oh, if you don't do this, you're gonna be a bad mother for the baby. Like, the baby has to do this. I think how we support people in those turning points is very important. Again, it comes back to how they perceive the birth. An outsider may look and be like, oh, everything was fine. But if that person was shamed for their choices or the sounds they were making during labor, that can traumatize them. That can take away their experience. It's so sad.
Yes, exactly. And I think, once again, the birth isn't just like this, a finite, okay, this happened and now the baby's out and we all move on with our lives. If there is that emotional trauma or physical trauma, that can get stored in that woman's body, and it will literally impact her as a mother. We'll see I feel like these women are more prone to postpartum depression and anxiety. It might be harder for them to stay committed to breastfeeding. A lot of decisions are, and it all goes back to that support, right? And are they getting the support that they need? No matter what kind of support that is, the level of support, everyone's different on what they need. But regardless, these types of common postpartum symptoms are an indication that culturally we're not supporting women after birth.
Yeah. And then I also think it can trickle down to the actual child. So as they grow up, if they hear the birth story with negativity, then how are they perceiving birth themselves? So are they going into I've had this with students. Oh, my mother really had a hard time. I'm going to have a really hard time, because they colored it as birth is dangerous or scary or traumatic. And whether
genetic.
And then now that's their perception of birth. I always think about like the family tree of birth. What you've heard, and then it can be subconscious about it, is going to impact someone's perception of how they're able to birth. Are they capable of doing it? Are they not capable? My mom always at the drop of a hat will tell anyone my birth story. I was born in Boston, apparently almost on Storrow Drive. She would tell me all the time that she barely made it to the hospital, and my father wanted to stop for a snack, and she's like, no, we have to get there. And so, and I had this idea that my birth is going to be the same way. I had a very empowered, it's going to be quick, I can do it, my body's meant. But if I had heard over and over, it was the scariest thing, we almost didn't make it, I was so afraid of what was going to happen. You're almost like, this is the same story could be told in different ways. Now, my mom clearly wasn't scared about it, because she laughs about now how quick it was. But if I had grown up hearing how scary it was, I would then possibly approach my birth as, this is dangerous and scary and something I should not trust. So I think the stories in which we're told, and that can just keep trickling down.
There's no doubt. And it can come from family. It can certainly come from friends, like we were mentioning. It comes from culture, like the movies and TV shows that we watch in general do not show these positive birth experiences. They're very traumatic and fear and pain and,
Yeah.
Drama.
Very much drama.
And unrealistic. So if that's all a woman knows about birth, then we can see how that could really shape the birth that she has.
Trust in the system. I mean, that comes up a lot, especially for women of color, just trust in the system.
Of course. And there's reasons for all of this. Like, it all comes from somewhere, but at the end of the day, we can really kind of step back as women and be like, okay, that might have been that other woman's experience, but what do I want my experience to be? And how do I make that happen?
Yeah. And so again, I think some of the tools, if listeners are thinking, well, what do I do? I think you and I have given some really solid tools of who you bring as part of your team makes a really big difference, and finding the support that will respect and listen to you. And I know it's hard. It is really hard to speak up for yourself. I remember one time with my midwife, she was having me see her assistant for a while. And I'm like, but I hired you. I want to have a relationship with you because you're the one showing up at my house. And it was really hard to speak up. Like, I wrote out what I was going to say. And here I am, an advocate for other people. And yet I recognize it's not so easy.
It's hard. And, it also goes back to, I think, culturally as women, we've not really spoken up for ourselves in a lot of areas, not just birth. So it is uncomfortable. I know I've also gone through that myself as a woman. But despite that discomfort, why is it so important? Like, why is it worth standing up for ourselves and advocating for ourselves?
Yeah. And I think it's because we want to be able to step forward into parenthood without the trauma to overcome. Parenthood is hard enough without having to process a negative birth experience. I mean, physically, there's a lot that's happening in the postpartum body, emotionally, that we don't need that extra trauma. And that is something that that kind of spurs me to keep moving forward, is helping people possibly avoiding some of that trauma during pregnancy and birth. So when they enter new parenthood, it doesn't have to feel so heavy. It already feels it's such a life transition, but it can just be a little bit easier for them.
Right. That's right. And I know we briefly talked about birth team with the birth provider, doula, but other things would include prenatal yoga,
yes,
chiropractic, acupuncture, massage, and just other, going to childbirth education.
Yeah.
And it may not be the one, if you choose a hospital birth, it may not be the one at the hospital even.
I actually think it shouldn't. I'm really a strong, I'd say, because, and again, independent, because then you're not necessarily hearing what, and I have some friends that teach at hospitals and they've been told like, this is the outline in which you're going to teach. And they're like, okay, I'll do the best I can within that. And even in prenatal yoga, like that's it's an easy place to start to digest the idea of decision making. So like when we're in class, and this is a little different than a typical yoga class, where for the most part in a regular yoga class, you have your teacher telling you what to do and you're showing up doing what they say. At PYC, we really actually invite exploration, that I give this invitation to what is your body telling you? If I'm giving you something and it is not jiving with you, or on the other side, maybe you found something that feels fantastic, you don't have to, especially online where it's easier. No, it's not like you're in the room and someone's doing something totally different. Then I want them to explore and sit with that and see, do I want to lean into this more? Oh, this doesn't feel right in my body. And so certain times of class, I'll give like 2 or 3 different options and be like, what are you drawn to? What feels right for you? And I think that's a place to start to exercise some of that trusting your decision making and taking power of my body has a lot of knowledge. I just sometimes need to listen to it. And then that true body autonomy of like, this is what I need to do. Sometimes I don't even need to do the pose. I need to sit. I need to just get quiet with myself. And if it can be on something like the yoga mat, which really has little consequences, it can start to just build a trust and confidence that you can then approach things that have a little more consequence, a little bit more at risk.
Yeah, that's such good advice. Because even, like you said, for those of us who were doing yoga before we were pregnant, you just followed what everyone else in the crowd was doing. And if you couldn't do that headstand, you're like, oh crap, I'm like the little, I can't do that. And everyone else is against the wall or not.
Crap, you're like, oh, I remember being in classes and I was in I'm in advanced yoga, and there'd been times like peer pressure. I'm like, I really want to come out of this headstand, but no one else is.
Right. Peer pressure.
Like,
peer pressure.
Triceps are burning. I'm sweating. And I'm like, and in my head, I'm like, Deb, just come out. I'm like, no one else is. And if I was giving the invitation, like, listen to your body's limitations, maybe I would have. And so that's what we try to do in yoga. Just introduce that we have a lot of body intelligence, but maybe we haven't been given the permission to trust that.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And it's really connecting with your body and listening and respecting throughout pregnancy, during labor, after birth. It's like, while you're pregnant, what do I want to eat today? Do I want to fuel my body with foods that are going to nourish me and nourish my baby or not? Do I want to go for that walk, around the block and get a little movement? Do I want to show up for a prenatal yoga class? Like, these are all choices that we get to make.
Yeah. And then sometimes they show up. Their body might be like, okay, mentally you got yourself here, but maybe I want to hang out in a restorative pose. Maybe that's what I need. And then I want to offer that to them, saying, if that is what you need, go for it. And that could feel really good to take that ownership.
Yeah. And that's really being respectful of not pushing, especially, and this because you're in New York, women are in this area in general are very type A driven, and they just came from like a 10-hour workday, hugely pregnant, and they're like, let's do some yoga and power through. And it's like, we can actually wind down and chill.
Sometimes we can. Sometimes, let's leave some sensation. Let's actually create a safe discomfort to learn those skills. But then other times, maybe that's not what you need.
Mm-hmm. And every week can look different. And that's totally fine. Well, Deb, I've loved this conversation so much. It's been amazing. Any last thoughts you want to share?
I just want to keep reminding people that we have such innate intelligence and that it's there. And sometimes the voices in our head overpower that. But if we can find a little space, we do have a lot that can guide us in the right way.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode and enjoy listening to the podcast, please take some time to rate and review it. We want to have as many people share their experiences with Well-Adjusted Mama and how much they have learned from the different guests that we've had on here. And also, if you want more information of how you can empower your pregnancy and birth experience and are not yet pregnant, check out my holistic preconception program at drlaurabrayton.com, Brayton Birth Method, to learn how you can physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually prepare for pregnancy.